You don't know if you're going to have to prove to people that you're a magician or fake being a magician, one or the other, whatever your situation may be. And a lighter and some flash paper could go a long way in convincing them that you're powerful and they should not mess with you.
Welcome to A Book and a Dream with Megan O. Russell, an author's adventure in writing, reading, and being an epic fangirl.
Hello, my name is Megan O. Russell, and welcome to episode 35 of A Book and a Dream. Today I have my list of top 6 things I would take if I were going to vanish into a fantasy realm. Now, whether you're going through, the Narnia kind of means like slipping through a wardrobe or diving into a painting, or if, some weird spell is summoning you because you're the chosen one, whatever it is. If you're going into a fantasy world and you can only take one thing with you, you kind of have to really carefully consider what your one thing is going to be. Now, for my top 6, there are some conditions on a few of them. Like, take for instance number 6. If I knew I was going into the fantasy world and I was going to get to come back out, I would totally pack a camera as my one thing. First of all, so I could prove to people I had been there, and second, because I would have Instagram fodder for the rest of my life. I would never have to take pictures again. I could just be like, oh, remember that time I battled dragons? Well, now you do. Here's the picture, and I didn't even have to Photoshop it. So that would be really useful, but only if you were getting to come back. My number 5 pick would be a lighter and some flash paper. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but hear me out. You don't know if you're going to have to prove to people that you're a magician or fake being a magician, one or the other, whatever your situation may be. And a lighter and some flash paper could go a long way in convincing them that you're powerful and they should not mess with you. Also, a lighter is useful in case you get cold because, not all fantasy worlds are tropical paradises. In fact, most fantasy worlds seem fairly inhospitable, so a lighter would be a good idea. Which leads me to my number 4 choice, a space blanket. Just one of those little fold-up emergency blankets that you take with you when you're backpacking or they hand you after a marathon. Not that I know a lot about doing marathons, but I've seen people wearing them in pictures after marathons. That could totally save your life in a fantasy world. Because, a lot of fabrics that you're going to find that don't have, modern manufacturing available are not going to be the warmest. Sure, if you manage to stumble your way into being a rich person with fur or wool, you'll survive. But if you're wearing cotton and it's cold and wet out, you're going to die. So space blanket, super, super important thing to bring. Which brings me to my number 3, a compass. But only if their poles work the same as ours, which is questionable. So if you get to the fantasy world and what you brought with you was a compass, you'd have to figure out if their north matches what we think of as north. You'd have to ask a lot of questions and hope for a map in order for a compass to be useful. But if you happen to land in a fantasy world where compass points worked, which judging by fantasy books where a lot of them have maps and a lot of them have north, it should work, then a compass would be a lifesaver. Are you going on a quest to the mountains and you've never been there before? You know what's going to help you get there? A compass. Not everyone gets an elfin guide to tell them how to go on the quest. Not everyone has some little person standing in a pool of light saying, follow this path and you will go on your quest. You may need a compass. It's tiny, it's compact, people may believe you're a wizard. Super helpful. Leading me to my number 2, which is also a very practical thing, which I feel like people should not take advantage of in the real world. Clean water is such an important thing, and it's really hard to find. Not everyone is lucky enough to turn on the tap and have perfectly clean water come out. So a life straw would be my number 2 pick. Why, you might ask? Because if you're in some world where there's dragons, you can't drink the water that's been anywhere near where the dragon's nest is. Also horses. Also bacteria. Also all those things that they never really cover in fantasy books. But if you're running for your life from a horde of, elves, orcs, trolls, evil knights, and you get thirsty, you're not going to have time to stop and boil water. And you really shouldn't just drink water out of random streams. So a life straw could be really important. But my number one pick, and it's always my number one, if they're like, if you were stranded on a desert island, if you could only take one thing to the moon, no matter what it is, it's always my number one. I want a good packet of antibiotics. Like, I want a Z-pack. Maybe like 3 Z-packs. Can you get like a 3 Z-packet so that it only counts as one item? Because, yeah, antibiotics, man. It's something that we don't think about. But all those like battlefield cuts that they're getting in Lord of the Rings, a lot of them aren't going to make it out of that. You know why? Antibiotics. You're going to a place where you don't have any immunities for any of their diseases. Antibiotics. It may not work for everything, but let's just assume that it's like a 50-50 chance that it might end up saving your life within the first week you're locked in a fantasy realm. So, yeah, antibiotics. Also, all of these, like, should probably pack for, like, international adventures, too. Which is kind of like a fantasy world, but, you know, definitely pack the camera because you're going home again. So, what are your top picks for things that you would pack to go into a fantasy world? Have I skipped something? I know I like hopped over things like knives, swords, glistening headbands, you know, all of those things, because you could probably get that once you get there pretty easily. But what are the things that you would bring with you? Inquiring minds want to know. In other huge book news, Anchor and Crown comes out this week. There will be a link in the show notes, or if you're watching the video, just check above or below the video, depending on your preferred platform, for the link to Anchor and Crown. I am so excited for the first book in the Guilds of Ilbrea series to be out into the world, so check that out. And yeah, survival in a fantasy world. It's not all magic, people. Sometimes it's hard. We got to be ready for it. I'll see you next time. Bye.